Okay, so yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this. I'm gonna do some introductions. This is an event organized by Mayflower Our Voice Coalition, which is a coalition of community organizations, art groups, and individuals addressing the historical and current issues raised by the Mayflower 400th anniversary and its legacy of colonization. This talk is part of our joint project called Reconciliation with funds from Mayflower 400, aiming to bring cultural awareness, education, and conversation about colonization and to somehow honor the history and perspective of First Nations related to this historical chapter. My name is Anairda, and I am the project coordinator of Feminist Fusion, which is part of the Mayflower Voice Coalition. Feminist Fusion is a community social arts project in support of women's art and a public dialogue on feminism and social justice. And I'm going to be your host today as we try to take turns within the coalition to do this. So welcome, everybody. Our guest speaker, artist Melinda Schwakoffer, will lead the group in a creative participatory exercise, which she explained in detail in a minute, which will allow us to understand our past and find reasons for gratitude in our lives. Melinda Schwakoffer is an American artist and citizen of the Muscogee Nation with Austrian-American ancestry, who now lives and works on Dartmoor in the UK. Through her personal artistic journey, she had found that community involvement, social engagement, and deep healing can be achieved through art making. So I leave you with Melinda.
Widow, thank you for joining me today, everybody. And Adriana, thank you for inviting me to lead this session. You always put on such great events. And thank you to Mayflower 2020 Our Voices for hosting this event. I'll begin with introducing myself in the native way, in my language, and with a land acknowledgement. Hesje, Melinda Schwakoffer Jehu Jeff Kudos, Este Muscogee Oas. This means, hello, my name is Melinda Schwakoffer. I am Muscogee in the Muscogee language. I'm an American textile artist, an enrolled member of the Muscogee Creek Nation, and I have Austrian-American ancestry. I'm speaking to you today from my home on Dartmoor. My town, Morton Hampstead, was settled by Saxons in 600 AD, and prior to that, this land was inhabited by the Dumomni. So I'm going to switch to a slideshow of images to go through as I give my talk. So if you'll bear with me, I will share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? And let's start. Here we go. Okay, so today's topic is Rethinking Thanksgiving. I'll begin telling about the myth and history of Thanksgiving, the roots of Thanksgiving, and also speak about the National Day of Mourning that many Native American people observe. And there'll be time for questions at the end of this talk. And if you want to start putting questions into the chat box, that's fine, or you can hold it till the end and ask it at the end. And when I'm done giving the talk, which will be about 18 or so minutes, we might want, and after questions and answers, we might want to take a 3-minute break just to get up and stretch and get away from the screen for a little bit before we go into the creative exercise. So after the talk and our break, we'll turn our attention to the beautiful gifts from the earth that you've been asked to gather and bring, and spend some reflective time on gratitude and thankfulness. And then we'll break into smaller groups to share our thoughts with one another and listen, and come back to the large group to close the session. So first, a bit about my personal history. My native heritage comes through my father, Frank. He was born in 1920 to a Muscogee mother and an Austrian-American father. He grew up in a place and time where he was made to feel ashamed about being part Indian, as it was called in those days. The Muscogee kids didn't like him because he was white, and he was called a half-breed by the white kids. He left Oklahoma as soon as he could, and Frank met and married my mother, Nell, an Anglo-American woman, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles along with my siblings. I grew up disconnected from the Muscogee Creek Nation, the Muscogee community and culture, and my Muscogee extended family. I began to learn about my family history and our tribal history about 30 years ago. As an artist and a counseling psychologist, I have learned about the deep healing that can come through art making. I use art making to process and understand the historical trauma and unresolved grief handed to me through my native heritage. And in doing so, I've discovered my resilience and I'm reconnecting with my beautiful Muscogee culture. My artwork is about identity, journey, and ultimately finding home. Art making has given me a voice and a way to process and speak about things which have been hard to find words for. So I'd like to begin with some terminology. Indigenous people are groups who are the original or earliest known inhabitants of an area, in contrast to groups that have immigrated to or colonized the area more recently. A good rule of thumb when referring to Indigenous people of North America, call us Native American, Indigenous, or best of all, by our affiliated nation or tribe. Colonization is invasion, a group of people taking over the land and imposing their own culture on Indigenous people. And decolonization seeks to address this through direct action and listening to the voices of Indigenous people. So to begin, what is Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving is a national holiday in the United States, falling on the fourth Thursday of the month of November. It is one of the most important holidays in the calendar year, and the Wednesday before is the busiest travel day in the United States as people go home to celebrate with family, although not this year due to the pandemic. Thanksgiving has Native American and European roots. Native American people have always given thanks to the world around us. We do this every day, not just on one day of the year. It has long been customary for Native American people to have autumn ceremonies in which they express their thanks for a bountiful harvest long before Europeans set foot on our shores. Communal preparation and sharing of traditional foods are part of many of these events. They bind the community together and provide opportunities to pass down traditions and knowledge. Many celebrated their harvest with a ceremony that combined feasting, dancing, and ceremonial games with a giveaway, in which families gave away personal possessions to others in the community who were in need. And I've used this painting from Muscogee artist Johnny Diacon to show contemporary natives making food for a gathering today. The Six Nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, who live in New York State and parts of southeastern Canada, express their thanks in a recitation known as the Thanksgiving Address. Sometimes referred to as the words that come before all else, the words express thanks for fellow human beings, Mother Earth, the moon, stars, sun, water, air, winds, animals, and more. We will come back to this later on. On to the European roots. The American concept of Thanksgiving can trace its roots back to the other side of the Atlantic. Both the separatists who came over on the Mayflower and the Puritans who arrived soon after brought with them a tradition of feasting and celebrating the completion of harvesting in rural communities to thank God in times of plenty. The Thanksgiving celebrated today is more a combination of Puritan religious practices and European festival called Harvest Home, which consisted of nonstop feasting and drinking, sporting events, and parading in the fields shooting off muskets. And the Thanksgiving myth that I learned about in school is unfortunately still being taught today, and this painting illustrates the myth. According to the myth, the first Thanksgiving was a feast thrown to commemorate the friendship between Native Americans and the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims landed in 1620 and founded the colony of New Plymouth. They had a difficult first winter, but survived with the help of the local indigenous people. In the fall of 1621, the grateful Pilgrims held their first Thanksgiving Day and invited the locals to a big Thanksgiving feast, replete with turkey and pumpkins. The celebration together continued annually ever since. And you'll see from this painting, it captures the modern idealized view of English colonists and Native Americans celebrating a harvest feast and friendship. It depicts Native people as being lower than white people, being fed, and highlighting the dependency of them on and the whites as saviors. And there are no Native children and only one Native woman in this painting. And by the way, this image was on the Mayflower 400 website until it was demanded to be removed earlier this year. And this myth is problematic for at least two additional reasons. It leaves out the fact of over 400 years of cultural and physical genocide and land theft, and it erases the political and treaty-based nature of settler indigenous relations. So let's back up and look at some historical facts. What did the Mayflower colonists find in 1620? From 1616 to 1617, the Wampanoag, the indigenous people of southern New England had been decimated by diseases introduced by European explorers. The entire population of the Wampanoag village of Patuxet was wiped out by a plague except for a man named Tisquantum. When Europeans founded Plymouth Plantation amid the ruins of Patuxet, they found human bones littering the ground because there had been no one left to bury the dead. And who were the Mayflower colonists? The little band of religious refugees and entrepreneurs that arrived on the Mayflower in 1620 was poorly prepared to survive. They did not bring enough food and arrived too late to plant. They were not familiar with the area and lacked the knowledge, tools, and experience to effectively utilize the bounty of nature that surrounded them. For the first several months, many died from scurvy, lack of adequate shelter, and poor nutrition. Those Wampanoag who survived diseases were seeking a military ally and so befriended the Europeans, who possessed formidable weapons with their muskets and fowling pieces. As the starving time of the Europeans' first winter turned to spring, Tisquantum began to teach the settlers how to survive, and he set up a meeting between Massasoit, the leader of the Wampanoag Confederacy, and the first governor of Plymouth, John Carver. Massasoit negotiated a peace treaty with the newcomers, in which they pledged to maintain friendly relations and to come to each other's aid in case of outside attack, among other things. So what really happened at the first Thanksgiving? In 1621, the Plymouth colonists and Wampanoag people shared an autumn feast that is acknowledged today as one of the first Thanksgiving celebrations in the colonies. The Wampanoag were actually invited to that Thanksgiving feast for the purpose of negotiating a treaty that would secure the lands of Plymouth Plantation for the Pilgrims. And it was more of a diplomatic meeting than a feast just to get together and make friends. And contrary to accepted myth, the celebration in 1621 did not mark a friendly turning point and did not become an annual event. The left-hand engraving is more accurate than the Ferris painting we saw earlier, but shows a settler taking the native man's hand in a dominating fashion. The right-hand illustration, made by Rui Tenrero for the New Yorker magazine, is a more accurate depiction of that autumn meeting in which they were honoring a mutual defense pact. So Thanksgiving becomes a day to celebrate victory over the heathen savages. Relationships between the Wampanoag and the settlers deteriorated over subsequent years, leading to the Pequot War. In 1637, in retaliation for the murder of a man settlers believed the Wampanoag killed, men from the Massachusetts Bay Colony burned a nearby village, killing over 700 men, women, and children who were members of the Pequot tribe. They had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleeping Pequots were surrounded by English and Dutch mercenaries who ordered them to come outside. Those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while the terrified women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The first official day of Thanksgiving was proclaimed in 1637 by Governor Bradford to celebrate the safe return of the men who had participated in this massacre. Governor Bradford wrote in his journal, "Those that escaped the fire were slain with the sword, some hewed to pieces, others rent through with their rapiers, so that they were quickly dispatched, and very few escaped. It was conceived that they thus destroyed 400 at this time. It was a fearful sight to see them thus frying in the fire. Horrible was the stink and scent thereof, but the victory seemed a sweet sacrifice, and they gave the prayers thereof to God, who had wrought so wonderfully for them. For the next 100 years, every Thanksgiving Day ordained by a governor will be in honor of the bloody victory, thanking God the battle had been won. Cheered by the victory, the colonists and their native allies attacked village after village. Thereafter, massacres of the native people were routinely followed by days of Thanksgiving. Native women and children over 14 were sold into slavery, while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with as many as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England. Bounties were paid for Indian scalps to encourage as many deaths as possible. Following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in what is now Stamford, Connecticut, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving. Women and children over 14 were sold into slavery, while the rest were murdered. Sorry, I lost my place. Yes. So following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in what is now Stamford, Connecticut, the churches announced the second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the heathen savages. During the feasting, the hacked off heads of natives were kicked through the streets like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded and his head was impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for 24 years. This set a precedent. For more than 2 centuries, days of Thanksgiving were celebrated by individual colonies and states. The killings became more and more frenzied, with days of Thanksgiving feasts being held after each successful massacre. In 1789, George Washington finally suggested that only 1 day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside instead of celebrating each and every massacre. Later in 1863, Abraham Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday during the Civil War to heal the wounds of a nation. On the same day, he ordered troops to march against the starving Dakota people in Minnesota. Thanksgiving continued to be celebrated on the final Thursday in November every year until 1939, when Franklin D. Roosevelt moved the holiday forward by a week in an attempt to spur retail sales at the tail end of the Great Depression. In 1941, the president signed a bill making Thanksgiving the 4th Thursday in November, and that is when Thanksgiving is marked today. So needless to say, not all Native Americans celebrate Thanksgiving. Many observe the National Day of Mourning. Since 1970, protesters have gathered on the day designated as Thanksgiving at the top of Coles Hill, which overlooks Plymouth Rock, to commemorate National Day of Mourning, which is a solemn, spiritual, and highly political day. This statement is from the United American Indians of New England website. Many of us fast from sundown the day before through the afternoon of that day and have a social gathering so that participants can break their fasts. We are mourning our ancestors and the genocide of our peoples and the theft of our lands. The National Day of Mourning is a day when we mourn, but we also feel our strength in action. Over the years, participants in the Day of Mourning have buried Plymouth Rock a number of times, boarded the Mayflower replica, and hung Ku Klux Klan sheets on the statue of William Bradford. And you can find more about their website and Facebook page. And here's another way that you can observe this day. Since early 2020, I've been collaborating with the artists who made the No New World sculpture in Plymouth. On Thursday, the 26th of November, the sculpture will be dimmed, and we invite you to light beacons for illumination and change. Be this lighting a fire, a candle, or simply striking a match. Share your voice and light a flame for a transformed world, and post it to your social media using the hashtags Mayflowers Kill or No New Worlds. And you can also join us at www.stillmoving.org/amplify to amplify your words and messages by leaving a voice recording so they can be reiterated for future generations. And I'll put these links in the chat in a few moments. So the purpose of this talk is to decolonize Thanksgiving by telling the true history of this holiday with an indigenous perspective. Many Native Americans celebrate Thanksgiving, many observe the National Day of Mourning, and many of us do both. I usually celebrate Thanksgiving with an alternative Thanksgiving feast to which I invite friends to share food and find gratitude in our lives. I talk about the true history of this holiday and about current issues in Indian country. In 2016, we made a post to social media in support of the No Dakota Access Pipeline protests. We begin the meal with each person sharing what they feel thankful about in our lives, and we have a wonderful evening together. And this year, however, we'll be together in spirit. So this concludes my short talk about Thanksgiving. I'm going to stop sharing and put some links in the chat and ask if anyone has any questions. Did everyone else see the slides? Good, okay, phew. Sorry you didn't see those, Linda. I'm not sure why that was, yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I don't know, Danny, you might know who was responsible for contacting the Mayflower 400 website and getting that Ferris picture taken off. I asked Stephanie, but she wasn't quite sure where that had come from.
As far as I know, you can contact Charles Hackett directly, or if you have any message, you can give it to us and we can give it to him. That's what he has said to me personally. Not know if Danny from Mayflower Mavericks have another information.
No, my apologies. I'm having reception troubles with my internet. And I'm not sure I heard your question, Melinda.
Oh, I didn't. Stephanie Pratt had mentioned that there was the Ferris painting used to be on the Mayflower 400 website, and I think somebody complained about it rightfully, and they took it off. But I don't know who to give credit to that person. I don't know who it was.
I'm sorry, I don't know either.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay. Well, I think, how about if we just have a little 2 or 3 minute stretch, a little break, and guys, I've asked everyone to bring some paper and something to write with, and your beautiful gifts from the earth that you've harvested. And so should we just have a little break and then come back in a couple or 3 minutes? Nice to see you, Erin.
Okay.
All right, we're ready to roll. So we're now going to switch gears and turn our attention to the beautiful gifts from the earth you've gathered and spend some reflective time on gratitude and thankfulness. And then we'll break into smaller groups just so we'll all have a chance to talk and listen to each other after we go through the exercise, and then come back together at the end to share our thoughts and say goodbye to one another. So in this activity, we'll give thanks to the natural world and find gratitude for where we are today, and we'll also look to the future. With our current climate emergency, deep divisions from one another, and continued consumerism and dominance of the natural world, we are at a crossroads, at a fork in the path. Our personal choices and collective actions will determine whether we continue along this destructive road or step onto a path which will lead us back into the circle of interconnectedness with the web of life. I know I can often feel helpless and out of control, but I believe the change we seek can start within us and spread through our circles and networks and keep rippling out and make the changes that we so need right now. So I'm going to invite everyone to just sit comfortably in your space, sit back into your chair, feel how it supports you, be aware of the atmosphere in the room that you're in, the temperature, what it feels like to be in it. And just take a deep breath and really be here in this moment, in our individual spaces and in this circle that we've made together. And as you come into the place where you are right now, just take your attention down through the floor and down through the foundations of the building you're in, and be aware of Mother Earth, which holds us and supports us all, and that we're all connected to and all a part of. So just a couple of more breaths and some really sinking into ourselves in the space that we're in. And we're first going to turn our attention to our fruit, leaf, flower, or vegetable, and this represents harvest. I've been reading an amazing book called Braiding Sweetgrass by, oh, so many words in my head right now, Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a botanist, a writer, a grandmother, and a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And in her book, she writes about the Native American concept of the honorable harvest. And when we harvest, this is what can be really beautiful to keep in mind. Ask permission of the ones whose lives you seek. Abide by the answer. Never take first, never take the first, never take the last. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Take only what you need and leave some for others. Use everything that you take. Take only that which is given to you. Share it as the earth has shared it with you. Be grateful. Reciprocate the gift. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. She writes, the honorable harvest is a convenant of reciprocity between humans and the land. This simple list may seem like a quaint prescription for how to pick berries, but it is the root of a sophisticated ethical protocol that can guide us in a time when unbridled exploitation threatens the life that surrounds us. Western economies and institutions enmesh us all in a profoundly dishonorable harvest. Collectively, by assent or by inaction, we have chosen the policies we live by. We can choose again. So I invite you to look at the gift that you brought today, which was produced by a plant, and just observe that it holds energy from the sun and nourishment from the earth. If a fruit or a vegetable, it nourishes us. If a leaf, it produced oxygen for us to breathe and tells us stories about the changing seasons. If a flower, it gives us beauty and provides pollen for the pollinators to spread and share. So take a moment to feel gratitude for all that this gift gives and all that this gift brings. And take some time to examine what you have brought today. What color is it? How does it feel? Does it have a scent? So really just take a few moments and hold it in your hand and just really look and smell and really engage with it. And know that your gift from the plants represents harvest and fruition. And cast your mind back over the past few months and consider what has come into your life as a result of seeds planted and energy expended. And now I'm going to ask everyone to take about 3 minutes to draw or write about what you've harvested, what you've brought with you today. So you can draw a picture of it, or you can draw what it represents to you about what you've harvested. And I'm going to put these in the chat so we can all keep track. So let's just have 3 minutes of writing or drawing. Okay, so let's turn our attention to our next object, which is the stone. It's always I'm so grateful we can be here together virtually doing this because we can't be in person, but it's so hard not to be able to read the space and kind of judge things. So I'll give 4 minutes the next time we do our writing because yeah, that might feel better. So our stone or touchstone, this represents where we are today. It could represent a safe space or a place that grounds you. It could be a physical place where you are right now, or a place that you go to, the sea, the woods, a river, to find grounding. And I'd like to share some words from Paula Gunn, who's a citizen of Laguna Pueblo. We are the land. That is the fundamental idea embedded in Native American life. The earth is the mind of the people, as we are the mind of the earth. The land is not really the place separate from ourselves where we act out the drama of our isolate destinies. It is not a means of survival, a setting for our affairs. It is rather a part of our being, dynamic, significant, real. It is ourself. It is not a matter of being close to nature. The earth is, in a very real sense, the same as ourself. So with those words, take some time to focus on the stone that you've brought. It might be too big to pick up or fit into your hands, or it might fit perfectly into your palm. What color is it? Is it round? Is it sharp? Is it jaggy? Does it have a scent? Does it have a taste? So really spend some time focusing on this stone that represents your safe space or your grounding place. And now let's take a few minutes and draw and write about that place. Okay, now finally in this reflective exercise, we're going to turn our attention to our seeds or seed pod. And this represents what you'd like to give back to your family, to your community, to the world. And once again, I share wisdom from Robin Wall Kimmerer. How can we reciprocate the gifts from the earth? In gratitude, in ceremony, through acts of practical reverence and land stewardship, in fierce defense of the places we love, in art, in science, in song, in gardens, in children, in ballots, in stories of renewal, in creative resistance, in how we spend our money and our precious lives, by refusing to be complicit with the forces of ecological destruction. Whatever our gift, we are called to give it and dance for the renewal of the world. So now take some time to focus on your seeds or pod and just consider how it feels in your hands. What color is it? Is it a single seed pod or is it many different seeds? Is it something in a packet? Can you shake it? Does it make noise? And now let's take a few minutes to draw or write about your intentions, your hopes, your dreams or your goals, either for yourself and loved ones or for the good of all. What seeds will you plant? Okay, hello Lori's kitty, I saw you waving. So I think now we're going to go into breakout rooms so we can all have a chance to share and listen to each other. I've put the questions in chat. And yeah, if one person in each room wants to maybe decide what you want to share when we come back, you can do a synthesis of what was said, or I'm not sure, just use your creativity and however you would like. So I'll ask, I don't know if it's Adriana or Helen who's going to put us into rooms. I think the experience of holding circles like this online, of being able to go out from a place where we can all be together and doing it online and find out it is able to make connection here, and to honor a new way of working and moving into a new way of working, and just an appreciation of home. Lockdown hasn't been, I mean, there've been a lot of challenges, but I love the home that I live in, so that's been really wonderful. And then my stone that I brought, this is a stone that I found on the beach in South Devon, and it's a beautiful smooth stone that had been smoothed by the waves. The home I live in is a very safe space, and my spiritual home is the desert. I used to go camping a lot when I lived in Southern California, and the desert's a very challenging place to be, but it breaks something open inside of me that I'm not normally in touch with. And here on Dartmoor, when I'm out on the land, I really connect with the rivers and the trees and the land, and I sort of feel like I'm finding my Muscogee, my Native American feet over here, because my people used to live along rivers and so on. So my stone represents both of those things. And then my seed is an honesty seed, and they get that really translucent papery bit in this time of year. And when I think about the seeds that I want to plant, it's honesty, to tell the truth, to consider the earth and all of the choices I make, to be vulnerable, to not know, and how to be in service to my community is to do community art groups like this and help people find healing through art making. I'm connecting with my Muscogee community, which is based in Oklahoma. I'm able to do that online. And I really want to find a pledge and make a stand. I don't know what that is, but I feel like this is such an important time for us to do that. The Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address are greetings to the natural world. Through these words, our minds are gathered together to share our thankfulness of what nature provides and acknowledges the ongoing impact of these forces on human lives. So it's the other way around. It's us realizing how nature impacts us and how we belong in nature. These words are spoken by the 6 nations of the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee to open and close major gatherings or meetings at the beginning of school days, and also sometimes used individually at the beginning or end of the day. And these words are freely given to be spoken and shared with everyone. So I don't want to take any more of our time to read this to you, because it's quite long, but I encourage you to seek it out. The YouTubes I have a couple of short versions of it, and they're really beautiful, and I think fit in with the theme of today, which is thankfulness and gratitude, and looking beyond the myth that we've been sold about Thanksgiving, beyond the myth of colonization and all of that, and just finding ways to be grateful in our lives. And this has been such a wonderful way to spend a Saturday mid-afternoon for me. And thank you for being able to stay over, because that's how it was today. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Thank you, everybody here. A couple of announcements. If you like this format, this is something that we experimented with Melinda and Stephanie this year, a feminist fusion. So we're gonna keep this creative format for the next online feminist fusion. The next one is this Saturday with the Two-Spirit indigenous speaker Sandy Laframboise, and then after that another one in December, which is the same format, is creativity. So. And also the next Mayflower Our Voice event will be a creative one as well, with client culture, with Helen Moore from Client Culture, who's gonna teach us how to do a zine in the same, you know, in a format like this. So please do join us, following updates in our Facebook pages. And thank you so much for being here, for sharing. It's been really moving and inspiring to hear you all. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful week.
Bye, everybody.